Joining us now to discuss this story and more, Kentucky Congressman, member of the House Oversight Committee, James Comer. Congressman, welcome to the program.
Great to be on.
Great to see you as well. I'd like to start with some unfortunate news of the day. Colin Powell has died at 84 years old from complications with coronavirus. Your thoughts, your reaction to this news of the day. How are you remembering Mr. Powell?
Well, Mr. Powell was a great American. I grew up watching in college when the Gulf War was going on, and always had an admiration for Colin Powell. He was very prepared. He was very mature. He was a great leader. I think the military respected him. And I think that the Biden administration could have learned a lot from Colin Powell. I mean, he was what the true definition of a leader is, and his story is tremendous, and he's just a great American that will be remembered very favorably in the history books.
Yeah, he will indeed, making such a difference and breaking so many barriers as well. In the meantime, Congressman, while you're here with us, I'd like to talk to you about what's going on with our supply chain issues. I know that you and your Republican colleagues on the House Oversight Committee are requesting a staff-level briefing on the ongoing supply chain crisis no later than October 26th. So you've got a deadline out there. Has the White House responded to your request?
No, and they never respond when they don't have a plan. We've asked for plans for many things, from the supply chain all the way to the debacle in Afghanistan. And if they had a plan and they feel like they're in the right, then they usually respond to us. But when they don't have any idea what they're doing, then all we hear is crickets. And that's what we have in this situation. If you look at what the problem is with the supply chain, a lot of it can be traced back to policies of the Biden administration and liberal Democrat policies from Gavin Newsom in California. For example, in California, they have restrictions on trucks that no other state has. So about half the trucks that are running in my home state of Kentucky right now would be out of compliance in California because of the strict environmental standards they have on engines. They also, we have a labor shortage in America, and part of the problem is the Biden administration had policies out there for many, many months that paid people not to work. Then you look at the new crisis of the day with the labor shortage, and that's the vaccine mandates, and there are just a lot of people that aren't going to work for any company that requires them to be vaccinated. So all of these problems can be traced back to many of the policies of the Biden administration, and the quickest thing that Biden could do to fix the problem would be undo a lot of these burdensome regulations, these unnecessary policies, but so far he refuses to do anything.
Well, you mentioned the Biden administration, and let's talk about a key figure in all of this, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. He's out on paternity leave, but he has been making some of the rounds on cable news channels. He had to say this about the ongoing supply chain crisis. Watch.
Certainly a lot of the challenges that we've been experiencing this year will continue into next year, but there are both short-term and long-term steps that we can take to do something about it. Look, part of what's happening isn't just the supply side, it's the demand side. Demand is off the charts.
Your thoughts on the comments there. Is that true? Is it just that so many people are demanding all of these goods, they can't keep up with the demand?
Well, I'm sure that demand is up. But here's the problem. What the Transportation Secretary said was nothing. He stated the obvious and didn't have a solution to the problem. We should have leaders in office in Washington right now who identify the problem, identify solutions, and then work to achieve their goals. But the Biden administration, as in this example with every other crisis they've had, from the border to Afghanistan, they don't have a plan. And until they undo these burdensome, unnecessary regulations, we're going to continue to see this supply chain backed up. And I'll tell you what's going to happen. A lot of factories in Kentucky depend on raw materials from the Trans-Pacific region to come in. They're already behind. We've seen that with vehicles. Kentucky's a huge automotive state. They've manufactured every part of the vehicle except the chips in the vehicle, so they're storing all these vehicles at the Kentucky Speedway.
Right.
Other factories are going to be shut down now because they can't get raw materials in for their supply chain. So this is a crisis. This is a crisis that could lead to unemployment. At a time when we have a labor shortage, can you imagine having skyrocketing unemployment to go along with inflation? We're going to have to bring back Jimmy Carter's misery index before it's all said and done to measure the problems the Biden administration is creating. And it's very disappointing that the Transportation Secretary would go on national TV, state the obvious, and not provide any solutions to the problem.
Well, you mentioned, too, that vaccine mandates could also impact, quite frankly, the workforce, what you're saying. You and your House Oversight Committee colleagues, you sent a letter to the Labor Secretary, Marty Walsh, asking for information about this plan to implement the vaccine mandate for the private sector. We've got part of that letter. You said President Biden's authoritarian mandate imposes troubling and probably illegal constraints on American businesses and their employees. It's just the latest example of President Biden and his administration breaking promises, making decisions with no thought towards implementation or real-world impacts. What information are you hoping to hear back from the White House?
We want to know exactly what was the decision-making process that led Joe Biden to break his campaign promise and say he was going to force mandates on employers for forced vaccination. If you'll remember, during the campaign, he promised he wouldn't do that. Now, what I find ironic is the day that he announced these forced vaccinations was on the same day that he was catching so much heat from the media over his debacle in Afghanistan. And if you'll remember, the mainstream media quickly shift focus from the debacle in Afghanistan to President Biden's COVID strategy to force every employer in America with over 100 employees to have their employees vaccinated. Now, was this a political decision or was this a science-based decision? And thus far, they haven't produced any science that shows that. You know, I'm a Kentuckian. We just had a big football game this weekend, Kentucky and Georgia at Georgia. You saw a stadium full of people. Remember, Dr. Fauci said those would be super spreader events. Yeah. They haven't been. The American people are sick and tired of misinformation coming out of the Biden administration with respect to COVID. And when you look at the labor shortage, and you've got a problem with employees in healthcare and transportation and every sector of our economy that are refusing to go to work because of forced vaccinations, then that's something that should be on the table to undo. And unfortunately, Joe Biden's sitting there silent, and he won't provide any details of his decision-making process, and he certainly won't provide any details of how he's going to fix all these crises that we have in America through his own making.
Yeah, well, you've got a number of information requests out there. We appreciate you coming on the show and talking about that. Hopefully we get some answers soon. Congressman James Comer joining us live. Congressman, thank you so much.